Hello everyone, just Goran here and welcome back to another real-life zoo tour. Today we are visiting Dierenrijk near Eindhoven, or Dierenrijk Nuenen, or Dierenrijk Mierlo, or Dierenrijk Europe. They go by a lot of names. Anyway, Dierenrijk was opened in 2004 by the parent company of the Beekse Bergen, Libema, so only being 17 years old, it's a really young zoo. They started out with a collection of mostly European animals, but have been growing rapidly, planning to more than double in size in the coming years. At least that's what I was told by one of the volunteers. Because Corona is still a thing, there is a mandatory walking route, but luckily that doesn't stop us from seeing most of what this zoo has to offer. So, I arrived by bike. It only takes about half an hour for me to cycle to the zoo from my home in Eindhoven, which is pretty incredible. And after I got my ticket, I could just get in through the main gate, but before that, there's actually a meerkat habitat before the entrance. Just a lovely small habitat with many windows to look through, a small backstage building in the back, and some spots for shelter. After going through the gate, we end up at the opening square with a huge playground, restaurant, and our way into the zoo. First we encounter this indoor apicoya building, which I at first thought was an indoor area for the chimpanzees, but it turns out it actually has some small reptiles, insects, and an indoor play area. All indoor areas were still closed due to corona measures when I was at the zoo, so I couldn't see for myself. But once all the corona restrictions are lifted, I would love to return to the zoo to see everything I missed today. So, small look at some of this backstage before we view the wildlife tree. This is the donation sign of the zoo, featuring all the names of people that adopted an animal through the Wildlife Foundation. This is the same charity organization that the Beekse Bergen has, and the money that this organization gathers does not go to the zoo, but it actually helps animals in the wild, which is pretty freaking cool. Anyway, enough buildings, let's look at our first habitat. This one is for the Asian black bear, and there's a little sign on the window saying that one of the bears doesn't have very nice looking fur because she is coming of age. Good to inform us of that. There's also a sign that says that there's Corsac foxes in this habitat. I didn't spot any of those, but I'm sure they're there. It's a pretty nice large habitat, and they've got enough spaces to hide. So yeah, moving along the path we get to an Asian small-clawed otter habitat, as well as a future habitat of porcupines and banded mongoose, which will arrive somewhere throughout June, so that's pretty soon already. So back to the otters, they have a nice large pond here. Also there's a stork nest, but what's really cool is that there's this little climbing bridge over the habitat, so the otters might actually swim under or right by you. Sadly it was closed off, but we do see some otters enjoying the sun right here. Speaking of which, today was a really hot day, and although it was nice to be outside, I did get sunburned and the animals were not very active. You know, you win some, you lose some. But yeah, here is a place you'd normally be able to enter the lemur habitat, but this was closed at the moment, so we had to make do with this glass viewing area. The lemur habitat contained ring-tailed lemurs and red-ruffed lemurs, as well as maybe some birds, as they were in this aviary setting, but I couldn't spot any, so not sure if the netting is for the lemurs or for something else as well. Then across from the lemurs there's a nice little aviary, which was also closed, not because of corona, but to prevent the spread of the bird flu. This aviary has yellow-billed storks, cattle egret, and the European spoonbill. The habitat we can see on the left here is the red panda habitat, but we'll have a better look at that later. First up we have a small Parma wallaby habitat, which also has a small indoor viewing, which is pretty cool. Then going to the right, over here there's a little side path for the white-cheeked gibbon island. What I found pretty funny here is that the backstage building reminded me a lot of the ones at the Beekse Bergen. And if we look in the back, we can also have a nice view of the Asian elephants from here. But let's actually move up and get a closer look at them, because the elephants actually had some offspring this year, and he's so tiny! They also had offspring 3 years ago, so there is a 3-year-old elephant and a 1-year-old. So yeah, seems like they're enjoying their yard pretty well. I gotta say, it's a pretty nice large yard given the relatively small size of the zoo. The elephant also shared this yard with crab-eating macaque, axis deer and red deer. Very interesting mix of species. And now walking by the elephant habitat, we finally get a look at the red pandas. I was pretty shocked to see a transmission tower in the middle of the habitat, but I take it's well taken care of that the pandas don't climb it. The pandas have the same kind of barrels they have at the Beekse Bergen, and what is interesting is that they share the habitat with the Reeves muntjac. Personally, I've never seen a mixed species habitat with red pandas, so that was pretty cool to see. The panda, of course, was seeking shade way up in the trees. Here we have some of the red deer, or axis deer, I can't really tell the difference. The elephant habitat has many different viewpoints, which is pretty nice. Here we also have our first little side food area, toilets, and a small elephant-themed playground. This little habitat is for raccoon dogs, which were passed out due to the heat. And going behind the elephant stall, before we first encounter this little aviary that holds Java sparrow and pied imperial pigeon, there's also a bunch of signs talking about the silent forest, or how many Asian songbirds are threatened with extinction. And Silent Forest is a conservation initiative by the EAZA, so they're trying to help repopulate these bird species again. Gotta say, I love all the little pergolas around this area here, going all the way behind the elephant stall. Again, I wasn't able to enter these interiors, but it looks like they were pretty similar to the ones at the Beekse Bergen, with all of the logs in the walls. And as we get past the elephant stall, we get to see something really interesting. This is an elephant show area. And no, don't worry, this is not some unethical zoos that makes elephants do tricks for human enjoyment. What they do during the elephant shows is just the necessary training that keepers do with the elephants. This includes the elephants putting up their feet for health checkups, opening their mouth for dental checkups, and being trained to stay calm when they take blood from their ear, which is the only place you can take an elephant's blood because of how thick their skin is. Of course, due to Corona, there were no shows taking place at the moment, but I think it's super interesting and educative that they do these. Moving on, we have some wild boar. And some reindeer, which seem to have some indoor viewing in the back. Then we have some Bactrian camels, and what I was really surprised by at this point in the zoo was all the elevation changes, which we'll see more of in a bit. And here's where you would normally get that indoor viewing of the reindeer. Over here you can also find a big old slide, a shared alpaca rhea habitat. And some guinea pigs, as well as some chicken, which, you know, great to have some chicken. And now this area is where that elevation difference really comes into play. We have some Scottish Highland cattle on top of this hill, how fitting. And we get this great view of this huge aviary in the back, and I was so afraid we wouldn't actually be able to enter this because of the blur through risk, but we do get there later in the tour, so stay tuned for that. Now, one of the employees pointed out to me that you could see a griffon vulture chick, and fun fact, about a week after I was at the zoo, they released a griffon vulture back into the wild in Bulgaria. So it was really cool to see the conservation program in action here, kind of. Going downhill again, we see one of the entrances of the big aviary, or the bird kingdom as it's called, and we have a viewpoint of the wolf habitat, but we can't get to that at the moment. What we can get to is this amazing alpine ibex habitat, which is probably the best use of this terrain difference in the zoo. I'm not sure why, the large hill just felt so impressive to me, as I totally wasn't expecting anything like this going into the zoo. The animals themselves were also really cool, especially the male with their huge horns. Next up, this small netted habitat is home to the Eurasian lynx. and you can actually walk all the way around it to get some nice views of them. Of course, like most animals, they were kind of just chilling in either the sun or the shade. But as we go around, we encounter this nice backstage building, which is for the Siberian tigers. One last look into the lynx habitat, also showing their little backstage building. And then this holding area for the tigers before we cross the road and check out the European brown bear. And I think this might be the first time in my life I've actually seen brown bears for real, believe it or not. Maybe long ago as a kid, but yeah, it was great to see these animals, and as luck may have it, they are actually some of the most active animals today, which you'll see during the animal footage, which I'm probably going to upload separately, since this video is long enough as it is. Anyway, the bear habitat has this nice little pond for the bears to cool off in, and in the back you can also spot the wolf habitat we got a glimpse of earlier. Back in the day, the bears and wolves actually shared this entire habitat, but I think they got separated after an incident in which the bears ended up attacking and sadly killing one of the wolves. There's also one more cool feature to this habitat, but we'll get to that in a little bit. First we're going to check out the tiger habitat, which has this long corridor of a viewing area. The habitat itself is nice and lush, with some logs for the tigers to climb on. The tigers themselves were just enjoying some shade, like most felines today. There's this cool nook of a viewing area that shows both the tigers and the cheetah on the other side, but understandably this was closed off to prevent people from huddling together in there. And now we're kind of at the halfway point of the park, so there's another catering area and a pretty sizable playground. Not too comfortable filming a playground because I'm not sure if parents would appreciate that. But one thing that stood out to me was this place where you could run to see how you measure up to a cheetah, which was pretty cool. And of course, that's placed there for a reason. Right across from it we have the cheetah habitat, a nice open green field with 4 cheetahs huddled together in the shade. Crossing the playground back to the bear habitat, here's the cool feature I talked about. On either side of this glass viewing area is a picnic bench, so you can actually dine together with the bears. They even put some fish on the table to get the bears to eat there, so if you're lucky you can have an unforgettable experience here. But the brown bears aren't the only bears here. We also have polar bears. And what theming goes best with polar bears? According to this zoo, it's a Canadian school bus. No, but seriously, I think this is a pretty creative idea. And as the sign says, in Canada you might actually spot a polar bear from your school bus. And to complete the theme, they themed the entire catering stand after a bus stop as well. So that kind of ties this entire area together, which is pretty freaking cool. Now, moving away from the playground, there is another big seating area overlooking the Indian rhinos. The 2 rhinos you can see in this habitat are the older females that are being held here temporarily. Once they move back to Berlin, the zoo is actually going to get a younger female who they hope to be able to breed with. The rhinos share their habitat with nilgai, Indian hawk deer, and the Visayan warty pig. And there's quite a lot of fun education to be found around here, like the classic turn a thing to reveal a fact, but also this area where you had to look through some magnifying glasses to find all the things threatening rhinos in the wild. Here we also find the rhino stall. Judging from the look I got through the windows, it's pretty similar to the elephant stall. And we have a separate habitat for the male rhino. This is Gainda, who is about 2.5 years old and is currently enjoying a nice little mud bath. Here we also find another cool education sign where you have to clear a safe path for the rhino to cross, confronting you with what sort of problems a rhino might encounter in the wild and how creating safe passages can help them. What's pretty cool here as well is that the stables for all the other animals in the habitat are on the other side of this bridge we're standing on. So when the animals go into their stables, they might actually cross under you. Here we have another interactive sign. How can you help these animals? The answer is pretty simple. Donate to the Wildlife Foundation. It's maybe a bit of a cheesy answer, especially since you have this whole interactive sign set up for it. I expected something a bit more elaborate, but when you think about it, it really is that simple. Donating to the people who know how to help is a simple, easy way that you can make a difference for these animals. So here's another little view into the polar bear habitat, which gives a pretty nice overview of the entire grassy field and all the rocks. I think it looks pretty nice. And moving along here, there's something I found really cool. We have an aviary for the snow owl. And though you can't really make a walkthrough aviary for these types of animals, this zoo did the next best thing, a tunnel aviary. So if you're lucky, you might catch one of these magnificent owls fly over your head, but even if they don't, in general it provides some great views of them. Past the aviary, we get to what I think is kind of the main viewing area of the polar bears. Here you can see both habitats side by side. So we have the male on the left and the female with her 2 kids on the right. And yeah, kids! These polar bears are actually quite the successful breeding couple. This is already the 4th time they've had offspring, so the head of the breeding program kind of needs to decide if they're gonna move some of them around a bit to mix up the gene pool a bit more. Also, the female of this couple was taken from the wild, so I'm not sure what the full story is there, but what this does mean, as far as I can understand, is that because of this, their children are actually able to release back into the wild as well, so they've got some of that wilderness survival in their upbringing, I guess. And it would of course be really cool if they're actually able to do that, release these animals back into the wild and support their population that way. The male you can see walking back and forth over here was currently being kept from the others to prevent him from doing the deed with his daughter. It kind of looks a bit sad, but it's probably for the best. As far as the habitat goes, you can kind of see all of these pools that the animals have. No underwater viewing or anything, but honestly it was quite fun watching the polar bears disappear underwater and then trying to guess where they would resurface. Turning away from the polar bears again, we have another one of those tunnel aviary, this time for the Eurasian eagle owl. And after that we get to enter the bird kingdom. So to prevent the spread of bird flu, they did provide us with a fenced off tunnel to walk through, so no free roaming, but I was just happy to be able to experience this place. It's really one of the coolest aviaries I've been in. So many awesome birds to admire and such a huge space to, well, not really explore since of the whole being caged up thing, but you get the idea. Before we get to see any of the birds though, on the right upon entry we have a glimpse at some Arctic foxes. Not the best view at the moment, but we'll have to return some other time. In this aviary you might have already recognized some iconic birds. We've got the scarlet ibis, the little egret, black stork, grey-crowned crane, pink-backed pelican, Goliath heron, black kite, northern bald ibis, and the greater flamingo. Now that's a lot of birds. Moving along, we also find a habitat for the humboldt penguin, a species of penguin I had never seen before. In fact, at first I thought these were just African penguin, but no, these are South American, so pretty cool. I like that, at least for me. This zoo collection is very different from the animals at the Beekse Bergen, so I got to see a ton of new animals today. So we get a nice glimpse of all the flamingo before leaving the Bird Kingdom aviary, where we get to see another small playground and a building for ticklefish, which I later found out is where you can actually see a red gara fish, known for eating dead skin off of your feet and stuff like that. This was also closed, so moving on. Here we get to a Canadian beaver habitat, which has this really cool looking indoor viewing I couldn't get to. Across from it we have a bachelor lion habitat, where the lions were doing the same as all other felines, which was nothing. There were these cutout lions that you could pretend were eating your face, and at the press of a button even roared for you. How nice. Back to the beavers. Their habitat looks pretty sweet, lots of water as you'd expect. The beavers themselves were a no-show, unless Canadian beavers just look a lot like ducks. We get another view into the lion habitat, where you can see just how overgrown that entire fence is. And we also have a nice little habitat for raccoons and skunks. And I gotta say, I love all of these pebbles in the habitat. It looks real neat, and it really made this habitat stand out to me. There was this little viewing thing, which I didn't really know what I was supposed to see. And here we got another look into the raccoons and skunks. As well as a good look at the chimpanzee habitat, which has a bunch of climbing structures and some cool shelters in the side of the island. Now one last look into the lion habitat from the opposite side of the first look we had. As well as some more views of the chimpanzee island. And now we are already on our way to the final few habitat. So here you can get some fish food to feed the carbs that live in the mode of the Barbary macaque. So here you can get some fish food to feed the carbs that live in the boat of the Barbary macaque, who have a nice sizable island, very similar to the chimpanzee one. All of these nice little rocks and shelters into the side. And now the last new habitat is this small little tortoise habitat for the Hermann's tortoise. And we also have a look at the macaque backstage building, which it appears they can enter at their own leisure, which is always nice. And then we move back towards the entrance. So before we get there, we get a nice little indoor viewing at the tortoises, probably especially useful during the winter when most of them will probably be inside. And here's our last look at the chimps. We get to see where they were all hiding, huddled together in the shade of their shelter on the side over here. But yeah, that is it. We are back at the entrance. I spent about 2.5 hours on my first lap around the zoo. I went back for a second lap, hoping to catch some more nice footage of the animals, and I'm glad I did. I ended up seeing some really unique things. Which you'll see in the animal footage I'll upload separately in a few days from now. All in all, I think this is a great zoo. I'm not really here to review it or anything, just to share what I saw. But I have to say, I can't wait to watch the zoo evolve in the coming years, and when that happens, I can't wait to share it with all of you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the tour. I put a lot of effort not just into the recording and editing, but also doing some research on the zoo and its animals, just to make this video as informative as I could. If there's anything you'd like to see me do differently in future zoo tours, say if I were to interview someone of the zoo, what would you like to know? Please share with me in the comments and I'll see what I can make happen. For now, I will wish you a fantastic day and I will see you in the next video, stream, or whatever comes first. Bye bye!